This is a short reaction to the much anticipated rock documentary Becoming Led Zeppelin. I caught it with my partner on the final day of its IMAX run at Cineworld in Chichester, about a 45-minute drive from where we currently live in Surrey. I had been thinking to myself that there can be hardly any footage or photographs that I won't have seen before, but that proved to be only half true. Because it seemed to me that the producers had managed to get their hands on unseen footage from known events, including the March 17, 1969 performance in Copenhagen, Denmark, filmed in black and white, the one where they are playing to a group of kids sitting cross-legged on the floor. Also the colour footage from the March 18, 1969 performance in Staines, England, for Super Show, where they only got to perform Dazed and Confused. And finally, the colour June 19, 1969 footage shot in Paris for the TV show Two on Scene, where Jimmy and Robert are clothed in red and pink, and from where the film's producers captured an image for the promotional posters for the film. When all of these shows came on screen, I was thinking that I had seen it all before, but unless I was imagining it, there were some totally new camera angles. In fact, some really great footage. It was either brand new and previously unseen, or the producers of the film were presenting it in such a way that it appeared to be so. At least to me it did. It was the same with the still images. Shots would appear on screen that I was very familiar with, but they were then followed by new ones, obviously taken at the same time, but presumably unreleased until now, including the black and white shots from Olympic Studios London from spring 1969, where Jimmy is seen seated with the 606 Dakota acoustic, and also the time when he was photographed in the studio with the Bigsby-equipped Sunburst Les Paul, which had been owned at different points in time by Keith Richards and Mick Taylor, and which was also played at Windsor by Eric Clapton in 1966 at Cream's official debut. Each of the three surviving members was interviewed separately. I would have liked to have seen them all together, but the one-by-one approach must have been how they wanted to play it. They all came across really well, confident and likeable, as they told their stories of not only how they came to play together and how their various paths crossed in the mid-1960s, but also how they first took up their instruments and how Robert first started singing, with memories of their skiffle, rock and roll, and blues heroes and influences. These sections included a lot of new photographs, which I imagine were from their personal collections, and also some great footage of a very young John Bonham playing the drums with brushes while a friend strummed a guitar. It is incredible to think that they recorded their first album only a few months after their initial get-together, a jam that took place in a small rehearsal space on London's Gerrard Street in August 1968. Incredible, amazing, unbelievable, but true. We hear them sharing their thoughts and reflections of that day, how they all had the feeling that they were onto something very special. Just as Eric Clapton's playing moved up a half-dozen gears or more from the time he left the Yardbirds to when he started recording with John Mayall, Jimmy Page's skills went through a supercharger from his final recordings with the Yardbirds to that first Led Zeppelin album. It's hard to think of anything that was missing from the film, but if pressed and I was forced to think of something, I could only say that I would have liked to have heard a little more about Peter Grant's involvement, and perhaps an interview with Jim McCarthy and Chris Dreyer of the Yardbirds. And from a guitarist perspective, I would have loved to have heard Jimmy taking us through the guitars, amps and effects he used on those first two albums. But these are small points in an otherwise brilliant presentation. Everything and everyone in the story came together at the right time, in the right circumstances. You couldn't imagine it happening any other way or with anyone different in the lineup. With Terry Reid or Steve Marriott, brilliant performers with incredible voices, but it just wouldn't have worked out a tenth as good as it did with Planty, as John Bonham's wife Pat used to call him. Keith Moon, Paul Francis or B.J. Wilson of Procol Harum on the drums, fabulous musicians, but after Jimmy and Peter Grant saw John Bonham playing with Tim Rose in a Hampstead, North London club in July 1968, they knew that he was the one they had to have. And as for the bass guitar, could there ever have been anyone more suited to the job than the supremely talented multi-instrumentalist John Paul Jones? Of course not. And the film makes all of this perfectly clear. A wonderful record of how it all came together when the stars could not have been more perfectly aligned.